The gentle hum of conversation filled the luxurious lobby of the Golden Bay Resort, where Raj had worked as a server for the past 3 years. It was just another busy Sunday brunch service, with wealthy guests enjoying their elaborate buffet spreads and bottomless mimosas. At 26, Raj was one of the most experienced servers on staff, known for his quiet efficiency and warm smile. That morning had started like any other. He'd arrived early to help set up the breakfast buffet, carefully arranging the fresh fruit platters and ensuring the coffee stations were fully stocked. The restaurant manager had just finished the morning briefing, reminding everyone about the importance of maintaining the hotel's 5-star service standards. Little did Raj know that this ordinary Sunday would become the most challenging day of his career, testing not just his professional skills, but his basic human instincts and moral compass. The first sign that this day would be different came around 11 a.m., when a well-dressed family of 4 was seated in his section. The parents were busy discussing their upcoming business meeting while their teenage daughter scrolled through her phone. What caught Raj's attention was their youngest, a toddler, barely 2 years old, secured in a high chair and happily playing with her breakfast. As he served their drinks, Raj noticed how the parents seemed distracted by their phones, barely acknowledging their children. Years of experience had taught him to be extra vigilant around such tables, especially with young kids involved. He'd seen too many close calls with hot coffee and precariously balanced plates. The atmosphere in the restaurant was particularly hectic that morning. A celebrity chef was staying at the hotel, drawing in more guests than usual. The kitchen was struggling to keep up with the demand, and the management had been pushing the staff to maintain their usual quick service despite being short-staffed. Raj was juggling multiple tables, yet he couldn't shake off an uneasy feeling about the family with the toddler. Between serving other guests and running back to the kitchen, he kept glancing their way. The parents were now deeply engrossed in what seemed like an important business call, stepping away from the table periodically. The teenage sister had wandered off to the dessert station, leaving the toddler alone at the table. Raj watched as the little one reached for a grape from her plate. Something about the way she grabbed it made his heart skip a beat. His instincts, honed by years of working around children, told him to stay close. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The toddler put several grapes in her mouth at once, her small face suddenly showing confusion, then fear. Raj, who was serving coffee at a nearby table, noticed the change in her expression immediately. The little girl's eyes widened in panic, and her face began turning red. The parents were still away from the table, absorbed in their phone calls. The sister was nowhere in sight. None of the other guests had noticed the unfolding emergency. But Raj knew, he knew with absolute certainty, that every second counted. The hotel's strict policy flashed through his mind: servers were not to touch guests under any circumstances. Breaking this rule meant immediate termination, no exceptions. But as he watched the toddler's face turn from red to purple, policies and procedures became meaningless words on paper. In that moment, Raj wasn't thinking about his job, his bills, or his future. His body moved on pure instinct, driven by the basic human impulse to help a child in danger. He dropped his serving tray, causing glasses to shatter on the marble floor. The crash drew startled gasps from nearby diners, but Raj was already rushing to the toddler's side. Time seemed to stand still as he reached the high chair. The little girl's lips were now turning blue, her tiny hands clutching desperately at her throat. Raj could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears as he lifted her from the chair, his training from a long-forgotten first aid course suddenly crystal clear in his mind. The restaurant had fallen silent, all eyes now fixed on the unfolding drama. In the distance, Raj could hear someone shouting for a manager, while another voice called for medical help. But in that crucial moment, he knew it would be too late if he waited for either to arrive. As the first part of this incredible story ends, Raj stands there, holding a stranger's child, about to perform a maneuver that would either save a life or cost him his job. The weight of that decision, and its far-reaching consequences, would soon reshape not just his life, but the lives of everyone present in that crowded hotel restaurant on what had started as just another ordinary Sunday morning. Without hesitation, Raj positioned himself behind the toddler, his movements precise despite the trembling in his hands. The entire restaurant watched in tense silence as he performed the Heimlich maneuver, carefully adjusting his strength for the child's tiny frame. One thrust, then another. The seconds felt like hours. On the third attempt, a small grape shot from the toddler's mouth, bouncing across a nearby table. The little girl drew in a huge, desperate breath, followed by a loud wail that echoed through the restaurant. It was the most beautiful sound Raj had ever heard. The child's cry snapped everyone back to reality. The parents, who had rushed back at the commotion, finally reached their daughter. The mother scooped the crying toddler from Raj's arms, tears streaming down her face as she held her child close. The father stood frozen, his phone still clutched in his hand, face pale with the realization of what could have happened. My baby," the mother kept repeating, rocking back and forth. The teenage sister had returned too, her face a mask of shock and guilt as she stood beside her parents. Other diners had risen from their seats, some applauding, others wiping away tears of relief. But the moment of relief was short-lived. Mr. Kumar, the restaurant manager, came rushing through the crowd, his face twisted with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, looking at the broken glasses on the floor, then at Raj. "You know the rules about touching guests." The father finally found his voice. "This man just saved my daughter's life," he said, stepping between Raj and the manager. She was choking, and he dash. "Nevertheless," Mr. Kumar cut him off, "we have strict protocols for medical emergencies. A server should never take such actions. We have trained medical staff on call." He turned to Raj, his voice cold. "Please come with me to my office immediately." The restaurant erupted in protests. Several guests stood up, voicing their support for Raj. An elderly woman at a nearby table declared loudly that she would never dine at the hotel again if they punished someone for saving a child's life. The teenage sister was now crying, repeatedly saying, "I'm sorry, I should have watched her better." But Raj knew the damage was done. In his 3 years at the hotel, he had seen Mr. Kumar fire people for much less. The manager was a stickler for rules and terrified of potential lawsuits. As Raj followed him toward the office, he could feel the weight of dozens of sympathetic eyes on his back. In the manager's office, the conversation was brief and brutal. "You violated our most basic protocol," Mr. Kumar said, shuffling through papers on his desk. "You exposed the hotel to massive liability. What if you had injured the child? What if the parents decide to sue?" "Sir," Raj tried to explain, "there wasn't time to call for medical help. The child was turning blue dash." "That's not your judgment to make," Mr. Kumar snapped. "We have procedures for a reason. I'm sorry, but I have no choice. You're terminated, effective immediately." As Raj handed over his name tag and employee ID, he felt strangely calm. The fear of losing his job, which had always loomed so large, seemed insignificant compared to what he had just experienced. The image of the choking child was still vivid in his mind, and he knew he would make the same choice again without hesitation. Outside the office, he found the child's family waiting. The mother, still holding her daughter who had now calmed down, stepped forward. "We can't let them do this," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "We'll speak to the hotel management, file a complaint dash." Raj smiled gently. "It's okay," he said. "I knew what I was doing, and I'd do it again." The toddler, now recovered from her ordeal, reached out toward him with a tiny hand. He gave her finger a gentle squeeze, fighting back tears of his own. The father pulled out his business card. "Please, take this. We'll make this right. What you did today. I can never repay you." His voice cracked as he looked at his daughter. "If you hadn't been there, As Raj walked through the lobby one last time, his former co-workers watched silently, their faces a mixture of admiration and sympathy. Some guests from the restaurant had gathered there too, and several tried to press money into his hands, which he politely refused. The story might have ended there, another tale of corporate rigidity trumping human compassion. But as Raj stepped out into the bright sunlight, his phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had posted a video of the incident on social media. Within hours, it would go viral, sparking a fierce debate about corporate policies versus basic human decency. Unknown to Raj, as he walked home that afternoon, his act of courage was already spreading across the internet. The hashtag Justice for Raj was beginning to trend, and news vans were pulling up outside the Golden Bay Resort. His simple choice, to save a child despite the consequences, was about to trigger a chain of events that would reach far beyond that Sunday morning in the hotel restaurant. And somewhere in the city, a small girl was hugging her mother extra tight, while her parents grappled with the reality of how close they had come to losing her, all because they had been too distracted by their phones to notice she was in danger. Their guilt and gratitude would soon fuel a campaign that would force not just one hotel, but an entire industry to re-examine its priorities. By sunset that same day, Raj's life had changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. The video of him saving the toddler, captured by another diner's phone, had exploded across social media platforms. The shaky footage showed the entire sequence, from his quick response to the manager's harsh reaction, and it had struck a chord with millions. In his modest one-room apartment, Raj sat on his bed, staring at his phone in disbelief. The notification sounds wouldn't stop. Local news channels were trying to reach him. His social media followers had jumped from a handful to thousands in mere hours. People from across the globe were sending messages of support, many sharing similar stories of corporate policies that prioritized rules over human life. His younger sister called, her voice excited. "Brother, you're everywhere. Turn on the news." On the small TV in his room, Raj saw his own face on the evening news. The anchor was discussing the incident, interviewing workplace safety experts and hotel industry specialists. The story had evolved beyond just his actions, it had become a debate about humanity in the corporate world. Meanwhile, at the Golden Bay Resort, the management was facing an unprecedented crisis. Their social media pages were flooded with negative comments. Guests were canceling reservations. The hotel's rating had plummeted across all platforms. Mr. Kumar, who had seemed so powerful just hours ago, was now frantically trying to handle damage control. The child's father, a prominent business consultant named Mr. Patel, had posted a lengthy statement online. He detailed how Raj's quick thinking had saved his daughter Isha's life, and how the hotel's response had been shockingly inadequate. "My wife and I were on our phones, ignoring our child," he wrote candidly. "While we will forever live with that guilt, it was Raj who stepped up when we failed. And for doing the right thing, he lost his job." The post hit home for many parents, sparking discussions about phone addiction and parental responsibility. But more importantly, it highlighted the absurdity of firing someone for saving a life. The family had hired a lawyer, not to sue the hotel as Mr. Kumar had feared, but to fight for Raj's reinstatement and policy changes across the hospitality industry. That evening, Raj received an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Chen, an elderly regular at the hotel restaurant who had always been kind to him, brought him home-cooked dinner. "You remind me of my son," she said, setting down the food. "He's a doctor now, but he once got in trouble at school for helping an injured classmate when the rules said he should have waited for the nurse." She smiled warmly. Sometimes, the right thing isn't in any rulebook. As night fell, the story took another turn. A group of Raj's former co-workers had organized a protest outside the hotel. They carried signs reading, "Heroes shouldn't be fired," and "People over policies." Many of them shared their own stories of being afraid to help guests in distress, fearing termination. The protest was peaceful but powerful, catching the attention of more news crews. The hotel's corporate office finally released a statement, but their carefully worded message about reviewing the incident only fueled public outrage. Social media users began digging into the hotel chain's history, uncovering similar incidents where employees were punished for helping guests in emergencies. Around midnight, Raj received another call. It was from a prominent labor rights attorney who offered to represent him pro bono. "Your case could set an important precedent," the lawyer explained. "We need to protect workers who choose to save lives rather than follow inhuman policies." But Raj was hesitant. He wasn't looking for fame or to become the face of a movement. He kept thinking about little Isha's face, how close she had come to tragedy. That's what mattered, not the viral videos or the media attention, but the simple fact that a child was alive because someone chose to act. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Mrs. Patel, Isha's mother. She had sent a photo of Isha sleeping peacefully in her bed, clutching her favorite teddy bear. The message read, "She asked about you before going to sleep. She called you her superhero. We can never thank you enough." That message moved Raj more than all the viral posts and news coverage combined. He saved the photo, remembering how close it had come to having a tragically different ending. Perhaps, he thought, sharing his story could help prevent similar incidents in the future. Maybe it could inspire changes that would allow other workers to act on their conscience without fear of losing their jobs. As the night grew late, Raj finally turned off his phone. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, interviews, legal discussions, and decisions about his future. But for now, he found peace in knowing he had done the right thing. In his small apartment, surrounded by the remnants of Mrs. Chen's dinner and the quiet hum of the city outside, he reflected on how a split-second decision had sparked a nationwide conversation about humanity in the workplace. What he didn't know yet was that his story was about to reach even higher places. In the capital, lawmakers were already discussing the need for Raj's law, legislation that would protect employees who break protocol to save lives. His act of courage was becoming a catalyst for change, proving that sometimes it takes one person doing the right thing to expose the flaws in an entire system. The next morning brought a scene that no one at the Golden Bay Resort could have predicted. The sidewalk outside was packed with people, hotel workers from across the city, holding handmade signs and sharing their own stories of being caught between rigid policies and human compassion. Local news vans lined the street, their cameras capturing the growing crowd. Inside his apartment, Raj was preparing for his first television interview. His sister had brought him his best shirt, the one he usually saved for special occasions. As he buttoned it up, his hands trembled slightly. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, but the labor rights attorney had explained how important it was to share his story. "Remember," the attorney had said during their morning call, "this isn't just about you anymore. It's about every worker who's ever had to choose between keeping their job and doing what's right." The morning news shows were all covering the story. Corporate policy experts were debating workplace safety regulations, while social media continued to explode with support. #Justice for Raj had evolved into #RightToSave, with people sharing similar stories from various industries: teachers punished for helping injured students without waiting for nurses, retail workers fired for stopping robberies, security guards terminated for breaking protocol to help people in distress. Around noon, something unexpected happened. A group of hotel industry veterans created an online petition calling for a complete overhaul of emergency response policies in hotels nationwide. They shared their own experiences of watching guests in danger, feeling helpless because of restrictive policies. The petition gathered over 100,000 signatures in just 3 hours. Meanwhile, the Patel family had become powerful advocates for change. Mr. Patel, using his business connections, had arranged meetings with hotel industry leaders. Little Isha had become the face of the movement, her innocent smile reminding everyone what was truly at stake. Mrs. Patel spoke at a hastily organized press conference, her voice strong despite her emotions. My daughter is alive because one man chose humanity over policy, she said, holding back tears. How many others might not be so lucky? How many workers watch helplessly as emergencies unfold, afraid to act because their jobs are at stake? This has to change. The Golden Bay Resort was feeling the pressure. Their corporate office had called an emergency board meeting. The hotel's booking rates had plummeted, and their once pristine reputation was in shambles. Mr. Kumar, the manager who had fired Raj, was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. By afternoon, local politicians had gotten involved. A city council member announced plans to introduce legislation requiring hotels to protect employees who act to save lives in emergencies. She called it the Common Sense and Compassion Act, though social media users preferred calling it Raj's Law. But amid all the chaos, a quiet scene was unfolding at a small coffee shop near Raj's apartment. Mrs. Chen had organized a meeting between Raj and other hotel workers from the area. They weren't there to protest or give interviews, they just wanted to share their stories and support each other. Last year, one waiter shared, his voice low, I saw a guest having what looked like a heart attack. I knew CPR, but our policy said to wait for the paramedics. I still wonder if I could have helped him survive if I'd acted sooner. Others nodded, sharing similar burdens they'd carried. As Raj listened to their stories, he realized that his viral moment had uncovered a deeper issue. It wasn't just about one incident or one hotel's policies, it was about restoring humanity to workplaces that had become too rigid, too focused on liability instead of life. That evening, something remarkable happened on social media. Hotel workers around the world began posting photos of themselves with the caption, I am Raj. The message was clear, they were all potential heroes, held back only by policies that valued rules over human life. The movement was growing beyond hotels. Teachers, nurses, retail workers, and others began sharing how their workplace policies sometimes forced them to ignore their human instincts to help others. A nationwide conversation had begun about the balance between corporate liability and moral responsibility. Back at his apartment, preparing for another interview, Raj received a video call from Isha and her family. The toddler was playing with her toys, occasionally waving at the screen and calling him her superhero. Her parents shared exciting news, major hotel chains were reaching out to them, wanting to be part of the solution. They're talking about creating new training programs, Mr. Patel explained. Teaching employees how to handle emergencies while protecting both guests and themselves. Your story opened their eyes, Raj. They're finally realizing that good policy and human compassion can work together. As the day drew to a close, Raj sat by his window, watching the city lights flicker on. His phone kept buzzing with messages of support and interview requests, but his mind was on something else. Tomorrow, he would be meeting with hotel industry leaders to share his perspective on creating better emergency response policies. It was a chance to turn his moment of crisis into lasting change. The viral video that had started it all was still spreading, but now it was accompanied by thoughtful discussions about corporate responsibility and human values. What had begun as one man's split-second decision was evolving into a movement that could potentially save many lives in the future. 3 days after the incident, the Golden Bay Resort's corporate headquarters finally made their move. The CEO herself, Mrs. Varma, held a press conference that would change everything. Standing before a forest of microphones and cameras, she did something rare in corporate America, she admitted they were wrong. What happened at our hotel exposed a fundamental flaw in our industry, she began, her voice steady but humble. We've been so focused on protecting ourselves from liability that we forgot our primary duty, protecting human life. Today, that changes. She announced a complete overhaul of the hotel's emergency response policies, starting with the immediate reinstatement of Raj with full back pay and a promotion to safety training coordinator. But she didn't stop there. The hotel chain would be implementing new emergency response training programs across all their properties, and they were inviting other hotel chains to join them. Raj watched the press conference from his apartment, surrounded by his family. His parents had arrived from their village the previous day, still trying to understand how their son had become a national figure. His mother wiped tears as she watched Mrs. Varma praise Raj's courage and quick thinking. "Look at what you've started," his father said quietly, squeezing his son's shoulder. "You've made us proud, beta." But the announcement was just the beginning. That afternoon, Raj received an unexpected visitor, the union representative from the Hotel Workers Association. They had a proposition that would take the movement to the next level. "We want to create a comprehensive training program," the representative explained, spreading documents across Raj's small coffee table. "Teaching hotel workers not just how to respond to emergencies, but how to balance safety protocols with human judgment. And we want you to help design it." The program would be called Hotel Emergency Action and Response Training. It would combine basic first aid and emergency response with decision-making scenarios, helping workers understand when and how to act in crisis situations. Most importantly, it would include legal protections for workers who responded to emergencies. Meanwhile, the Patel family had become powerful advocates for change. Mr. Patel had organized a conference of hotel industry leaders, where little Isha made a surprise appearance. The toddler, now recovered from her ordeal, walked onto the stage holding her mother's hand. "This is my superhero," she said in her tiny voice, pointing to a photo of Raj on the screen behind her. The room full of corporate executives and industry leaders fell silent, many wiping away tears. Sometimes the most powerful messages come from the smallest voices. Mrs. Chen, the elderly regular customer who had supported Raj from the beginning, had started a social media campaign called "Thank Your Hero." She encouraged people to share stories of service workers who had gone above and beyond to help others, often at risk to their own jobs. The campaign revealed hundreds of unsung heroes across the country. Back at the Golden Bay Resort, changes were already visible. Mr. Kumar had been replaced by a new manager who immediately began implementing the new policies. Emergency response equipment was installed throughout the hotel, and staff members were receiving basic first aid training. The atmosphere had shifted from fear to empowerment. One morning, Raj visited the hotel to discuss his new role. As he walked through the lobby, he noticed something different. The staff moved with more confidence, their smiles more genuine. Near the restaurant entrance, a new plaque had been installed: "In every emergency, human life comes first." The movement was spreading beyond hotels. Other service industries were examining their own policies. Retail chains, restaurants, and even schools were beginning to implement similar changes. The phrase, "Raj's choice," had entered the corporate lexicon, referring to situations where human compassion should override rigid policies. That evening, Raj received a call from a major news network. They wanted to do a special report on the changes happening in the service industry. But what caught Raj's attention was their request to film a reunion between him and little Isha. The reunion was scheduled for the following day at a local park. As Raj waited on a bench, he saw the Patels approaching. Isha, wearing a bright yellow dress, broke free from her parents' hands and ran toward him, her face beaming. "My superhero," she squealed, jumping into his arms. The cameras captured the moment, but neither Raj nor Isha noticed them. This was about something more important than news coverage or viral videos. Mrs. Patel joined them, carrying a small gift bag. "We wanted you to have this," she said, pulling out a framed photo. It showed Isha in her dance class, smiling broadly. "Without you, we wouldn't have these moments." The day ended with another announcement from the Hotel Industry Association. They were establishing an annual award, the Humanitarian Service Award, to recognize workers who showed exceptional courage in helping others. The first recipient had already been chosen. As Raj walked home that evening, he reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. His simple act of helping a choking child had sparked a revolution in how corporations viewed their responsibility to human life. But more importantly, it had reminded people everywhere that sometimes the most heroic thing we can do is simply be human. A week after the incident, the real impact of Raj's actions began to emerge in unexpected ways. The story had touched something deep in people's hearts, sparking a movement that went far beyond hotel policies. It had become a conversation about human connection in an increasingly automated world. At a community center downtown, Raj was preparing to give his first public speech. The room was packed with service industry workers, corporate managers, and ordinary citizens. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the microphone, but when he began speaking, his voice was clear and strong. "I didn't think about policies that morning," he said simply. "I saw a child in danger, and I acted. That's what any of us would do if we weren't afraid of losing our jobs. Fear shouldn't stop us from saving lives." The heart training program, which Raj had helped design, was already showing promising results. Hotels across the country were adopting it, and the first batch of trainees had just completed their certification. Among them was the new staff at the Golden Bay Resort, who now wore special pins indicating their emergency response training. One morning, Raj received an email that brought tears to his eyes. A hotel worker in another city had used the new training to save an elderly guest who had collapsed in a hallway. "I remembered your story," the worker wrote. "I didn't hesitate. I knew I was protected by the new policies, but more importantly, I knew it was the right thing to do." The Patel family had become close friends with Raj. They regularly invited him to dinner, where little Isha would excitedly show him her latest drawings, usually featuring stick figures of him as a superhero. But it was during one of these dinners that Mr. Patel shared something surprising. "Our company has changed too," he admitted, putting down his fork. "After what happened with Isha, we implemented a strict phones-away policy during family time. Sometimes it takes nearly losing everything to realize what really matters." Mrs. Chen had turned her "Thank Your Hero" campaign into a formal organization. She was now running workshops helping companies balance efficiency with humanity. Her years of observing service workers had given her unique insights into how small acts of kindness could transform customer service. "In my day," she told a group of corporate executives, "we didn't need policies to tell us to help people. Somewhere along the way, we lost that." Raj's story is helping us find it again. The media attention had begun to fade, but the changes it sparked were growing stronger. Other industries started examining their own policies. A major retail chain announced new guidelines protecting workers who intervened in emergencies. A school district revised its rules to allow teachers more discretion in helping injured students. One afternoon, Raj visited his old restaurant at the Golden Bay Resort. The new manager had arranged for him to speak to the staff. As he walked through the familiar space, he noticed small but significant changes. Emergency procedure posters now included a clear statement: "Human life comes first." First aid kits were prominently displayed, and staff members moved with a new confidence. During his talk, a young server raised her hand. "I was here that day," she said quietly. "I was too scared to move, but I saw what you did. Now I know what to do if something like that happens again." The corporate world was changing too. HR departments across the country were rewriting their emergency response policies. The term compassionate intervention began appearing in employee handbooks. Insurance companies started offering special coverage for employees who assisted in emergencies. But perhaps the most meaningful change was happening in everyday interactions. People were paying more attention to each other. Phone use during meals decreased. Parents were more vigilant with their children. Hotel workers reported feeling more valued and respected by their employers. Late one evening, as Raj was leaving another training session, he found Mrs. Patel waiting for him in the lobby. She handed him an invitation. Isha's third birthday party was coming up. "We want you there," she said warmly. "You're part of our family now. And we have something special planned." The party turned out to be more than just a celebration of Isha's birthday. The Patels had invited families of other children saved by quick-thinking service workers. It became a celebration of life, gratitude, and the power of human connection. As Raj watched Isha blow out her candles, surrounded by happy faces and echoing laughter, he thought about how a single moment could change so many lives. The choking incident had been terrifying, but it had led to something beautiful, a reminder that beneath all our rules and regulations, we're simply humans taking care of each other. The next day, Raj received news that would take his mission to the next level. A major university wanted to develop a case study about the incident and its aftermath. They wanted to teach future business leaders about the importance of balancing corporate policies with human values. "Your story," the professor explained during their meeting, "is changing how we think about corporate responsibility. It's showing that compassion and success aren't mutually exclusive." As this chapter of the story drew to a close, Raj stood at his apartment window, watching the sunset over the city. On his wall hung the framed photo of Isha at her dance class, next to his new certification as a safety training coordinator. His phone buzzed with another message: another hotel had adopted the Heart program. He smiled, remembering what Mrs. Chen had told him: sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness. What had begun as a split-second decision to save a choking child had grown into a movement that was helping restore humanity to the workplace, one policy change at a time. 1 month after the incident that changed everything, Raj stood on a stage at the National Hotel Industry Conference, facing an audience of thousands. The spotlight felt warm on his face as he shared his story for what felt like the 100th time, yet somehow it still carried the same emotional weight as the first telling. "A lot of people call me a hero," he said, his voice steady. "But the real heroes are the ones who took this moment and turned it into lasting change. The managers who rewrote their policies, the workers who stepped forward with their own stories, and yes, even the corporations who admitted they needed to do better." The conference had dedicated an entire day to what they were calling the human factor in hospitality. Hotels from around the world were sharing their experiences implementing the Heart program. The statistics were impressive: emergency response times had improved, guest satisfaction had increased, and employee morale was at an all-time high. During a break, Raj met a group of international hotel managers who had flown in specifically to learn about the program. A hotel owner from Japan shared how the story had influenced their industry across the Pacific. "In our culture, we already value service highly," she explained. "But your story reminded us that true service comes from the heart, not just from rules." Back at the Golden Bay Resort, the changes were now deeply rooted in the daily routine. The new manager had transformed the morning briefings from dry policy reviews into interactive discussions about guest care. Staff members shared their experiences, discussed potential scenarios, and built confidence in their decision-making abilities. Mrs. Chen's Thank Your Hero organization had grown into a nationwide movement. She had established partnerships with service industry training schools, ensuring that future generations of workers would understand both their rights and responsibilities in emergency situations. "Every day, I see more people choosing to help without hesitation," she told Raj over tea. "The fear is gone." The Patel family had become powerful advocates for work-life balance and corporate responsibility. Mr. Patel's consulting firm now specialized in helping companies integrate humanitarian policies into their business models. Mrs. Patel had started a support group for parents struggling with technology addiction, sharing her own story as a cautionary tale. Little Isha, now a symbol of the movement, was thriving. Her parents had enrolled her in a children's first aid awareness program, a new initiative inspired by her story that taught young children basic safety concepts through play. "Look, I can help people too," she proudly demonstrated to Raj, carefully putting a bandage on her teddy bear's arm. One afternoon, Raj received an unexpected visitor at his office in the hotel's new training center. It was Mr. Kumar, his former manager, who had fired him. The man looked different, humbler, older somehow. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Mr. Kumar said, sitting down heavily. "I spent 20 years enforcing rules without questioning them. That day, I was wrong. I wanted you to know that I'm working with other managers now, helping them learn from my mistakes." The conversation was difficult but healing for both men. They discussed how fear of liability had created a culture of inaction, and how breaking free from that fear had actually made hotels safer. Mr. Kumar had become an unexpected ally in the movement, his story serving as a powerful example of how people could change. The impact continued to spread in surprising ways. A major insurance company announced a new policy specifically covering employees who assisted in emergencies. They called it the Good Samaritan Protection Plan, and it was rapidly becoming an industry standard. Universities were incorporating the case study into their business ethics courses. Students debated the balance between corporate liability and moral responsibility, using Raj's story as a launching point for discussions about the future of workplace humanity. One evening, as Raj was reviewing applications for the next heart training session, he found a letter that moved him deeply. It was from a hotel worker in another city who had recently saved a guest from choking. "I had your story in my mind," the letter read. "But more than that, I had your courage in my heart. You showed us that being human isn't a liability, it's our greatest strength." The Golden Bay Resort had become a model for the industry. Tour groups of hotel managers regularly visited to learn about their emergency response procedures. The hotel had turned a potential PR disaster into a revolutionary change in corporate culture, and their business was thriving as a result. Mrs. Varma, the CEO who had initially supported the changes, invited Raj to join the company's board of advisors. "We need voices like yours," she explained. "People who understand that profit and compassion can coexist, that rules should protect life, not endanger it." The HEART program had expanded beyond its original scope. Schools, restaurants, retail stores, and other service industries were adapting the training for their own needs. The principle remained the same: empower people to help others without fear of repercussions. 1 year after the incident, the hotel hosted a special celebration. Employees from across the country who had completed the HEART training gathered to share their experiences. The walls were lined with photos and stories of lives saved, crises averted, and moments of simple human kindness. Raj stood at the podium, looking out at the faces of people who had become part of this unexpected movement. The Patels were there, little Isha sitting on her father's shoulders. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row, beaming proudly. Even Mr. Kumar had come, standing quietly at the back of the room. "A year ago," Raj began, "I made a choice that cost me my job but saved a life. Today, no one else has to make that choice. Today, we understand that being human isn't just allowed, it's essential." As he spoke, he realized that the true victory wasn't in the policy changes or the training programs, though these were important. The real triumph was in the restoration of trust, between employers and employees, between servers and guests, between rules and humanity. 18 months after that fateful Sunday morning at the Golden Bay Resort, Raj stood in front of a mirror, adjusting his tie. He was preparing for what might be the most significant day yet in this extraordinary journey, the first annual Global Hospitality Humanitarian Awards. The event was being held in the very same hotel where it all began, but the Golden Bay Resort was barely recognizable from that day. The lobby now featured a wall of humanity, a digital display showcasing stories of service workers who had gone above and beyond to help others. The restaurant where the incident occurred had been renovated, with emergency response stations elegantly integrated into the decor. As Raj walked through the hotel, staff members greeted him warmly. Many wore the now familiar HEART program pins, which had become a symbol of pride in the industry. The program had certified over 100,000 workers worldwide, and its impact was still growing. In the grand ballroom, the atmosphere was electric. Hotel workers from 6 continents had gathered for the ceremony. The Patel family was there, with Isha, now 4 years old, wearing a pretty blue dress and carrying a small trophy she had helped design. Mrs. Chen, despite her advancing age, had insisted on attending. She sat in the front row, her Thank Your Hero organization having evolved into an international foundation promoting compassionate service across all industries. The foundation had just launched a scholarship program for service workers pursuing emergency response training. The ceremony began with a powerful video montage. It showed news clips from the original incident, followed by dozens of similar stories from around the world, lives saved, disasters averted, moments of pure human connection. Each story was a ripple effect from that one moment when Raj chose to act. Mr. Kumar, who had become an unexpected champion for change, took the stage to introduce Raj. His speech was brief but powerful. Sometimes, he said, his voice thick with emotion, our greatest mistakes can lead to our greatest improvements. Raj taught me that rules without humanity are just words on paper. As Raj approached the podium to give the keynote address, he carried with him a special surprise, a new industry-wide initiative that would change the service sector forever. But before announcing it, he shared a personal story he had never told before. The night after I was fired, he began, I sat in my apartment wondering if I had thrown away my career for nothing. Then I remembered my grandmother's words from years ago. She told me, Beta, in life, you will face moments when you must choose between what is easy and what is right. The right choice might cost you everything, but it will give you something more valuable, the peace of knowing you honored your humanity. The room fell silent as he continued. Today, I'm proud to announce the launch of the International Service Workers Protection Act, a collaborative effort between major corporations, governments, and worker organizations. This act will ensure that no service worker ever has to choose between their job and saving a life. The announcement was met with a standing ovation. The act would provide legal protection, insurance coverage, and training support for service workers worldwide. It was the culmination of 18 months of work, countless meetings, and the combined efforts of thousands of people inspired by one simple act of courage. After the ceremony, there was a special celebration in the hotel restaurant. The exact spot where Isha had choked was now marked with a small, elegant plaque reading, Where Humanity Prevailed. Around it, people gathered to share their own stories of transformation. A young server from another hotel approached Raj with tears in her eyes. Last week, I saved a man having a heart attack, she said. I didn't hesitate, didn't worry about policies. I just acted. That's your legacy, you gave us back our right to be human. The Patel family had their own announcement to make. They had established a foundation focused on promoting mindful parenting and workplace humanity. The foundation would provide resources for parents struggling with technology addiction and support for companies implementing compassionate policies. Little Isha, who had become somewhat of a mascot for the movement, had started a children's safety awareness club at her preschool. We teach all the kids to help each other, she explained proudly to anyone who would listen. Just like my superhero taught everyone. As the evening drew to a close, Mrs. Chen gathered everyone for a group photo. In the frame were people from all walks of life, hotel workers, corporate executives, activists, and families, all united by a shared commitment to putting humanity first. Later that night, after the celebrations had ended, Raj took a quiet moment in the empty restaurant. He thought about how a single moment of crisis had sparked a global movement for change. The world was different now, not perfect, but better. Companies had learned that compassion and profit could coexist, that treating workers as humans rather than resources made business sense. Looking out at the city lights, Raj smiled, remembering all the pieces that had come together to create this change, Mrs. Chen's wisdom, the Patel's advocacy, Mr. Kumar's transformation, and countless others who had chosen to be part of the solution. The next morning, as Raj prepared for another day of training new hotel staff, his phone buzzed with a message. It was a photo from a hotel in Singapore, their entire staff proudly wearing Heart program pins, standing under a banner that read, "Humanity First," in multiple languages. The message reminded him that while his story had begun with a moment of crisis, it had evolved into something far more powerful, a reminder that in a world of policies and protocols, the most important rule was simply to be human. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of